All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today's lesson is one of the more intense lessons. This is one that I've had a lot of students over the years, like really paying attention, really focusing, and enjoying this lesson because this takes a little step away from like history books. We're still talking about the Civil War, but we're talking more into the medical field and what happens, um, what happened with the soldiers, and when they got hurt and injured and things like that. Okay, um, I will say this: in this lesson, I am very descriptive. I do talk about like when the gunshot, amputation, things like that, and some students have like a vivid imagination. They can imagine and feel what I'm saying. So if at any point this lecture gets a little too like much, or kind of like getting feeling kind of wheezy, um I suggest you pause the video, recollect yourself, or at the very least just copy the notes down. Okay, but still read it. And but other than that, watch this lecture video, listen to the whole thing, because again, like I said, this is one of those lessons a lot of students in my years of teaching have really like gravitated to and have given me like feedback like, oh man, that's wow, things like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see from this picture, there are three soldiers. Okay, each one of these guys served in the Civil War. Okay, so my question to you is this: which one of these guys do you feel had a harder life after the Civil War? The guy with no legs, in a wheelchair, the guy with no arms, or the guy with only one leg. And basically he's having to rely on a crutch his whole life. Okay. Now the other thing too I have to remind the class is this: there were no like ramps, or wheelchair access to places. You know, that didn't come up until I believe it was 1968. That's when they started having like making sure that stores doors were open wide enough for wheelchairs, and there were ramps and things like that. That the toilet, the restrooms were big enough for people with disabilities. All that stuff didn't exist back then. You know, so again, look at these three guys and tell me, who do you think had a harder life after the Civil War? Okay. So pause the video, write your response, because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now, here's the thing: it wasn't that hard to actually become a doctor during the Civil War. Now, why did I use that doctor? Because a lot of the people who were in the medical tents were not official doctors, you know? So, how did you become a medical doctor? Well, for one of the things, you had to be an apprentice to a local physician. So, another doctor, an actual doctor, a pharmacist, things like that. So, you had to learn under them for a little bit, like I believe it was like 2 or 3 months. Then, after that, basically, did you take any college courses in medical college? You know, if you did, great. Once you did your apprenticeship, they're going to put you in the field. Now, here's the thing with the college courses: it could be about any medicine class, anatomy, it could be how the bones are, and things like that, la la la. Or it could be something as simple as how to create medicines from herbs and roots and things like that. They would consider that like, hey, you got the medical class, so here you go. Okay. So a lot of these people who were surgeons were unskilled. They did not really know how to take out bullets and things like that, perform surgeries. So they went straight to amputation, because amputation, you didn't have to worry about if a bullet got shot, someone got shot right in the arm and the muscle is sticking out, and there's skin too out and about, with this open wound. You don't have to worry about getting these tools you see right here and like cutting the flesh and the muscle, so it's nice and clean. That you can put the tourniquet around just in case the person's bleeding out. You can, cut out the circulation and then, you know, stitch the stitch the wound close and things like that and treat it, treat the wound. No, you didn't have time for that. Because you have to remember, these guys in the medical tent, they're getting hundreds of men coming from the battle, coming in with getting shot in the eye, getting shot in the arm, leg, stomach multiple times, a cannonball ripping through their arm and things like that. So they can't take the time to, oh, let's take this little piece of metal out of your neck or your arm, let's treat this wound. They really didn't have time, so they had to hurry. And sometimes it was like, let's just cut it off, you know. So amputation became a common procedure during the Civil War. And so during the Civil War, there was about 230,000 surgeries done. Okay. Now here's another thing too, which you may want to pay attention to. If you look at that saw, look at the teeth of the saw. Now, if you don't know what I mean by the teeth, you see the handle and you see the blade, right? Look at the bottom part of it. And you'll see the little ridges. They're tiny and the points are like really, really close to each other. Like that. Okay. That's is a bone saw. That's used to cut through bone. Okay. When the teeth are very close like that, that's good. That's gonna make a nice clean cut. And you're gonna find something else in the next slide about the actual saws they used. So from that 230 some thousand plus surgeries, about 3/4 of them were amputations. So for every three people coming in with some type of wound, they basically said, let's chop that arm, leg, you know, hand, whatever it is, let's chop it off. Okay. The saw, like I showed you guys in that picture, that was a doctor's kit. This is the type of thing the doctors would go around from home to home if they needed to do something. They had their tools right there. Not every person who was a doctor had that. So the saws they did have was the ones not much different than the ones used to cut trees and limbs from trees. Now, like I said, those teeth on those, you know, saws, the doctor saws, were this big, like separated from each other. In the saws for trees, they are like that. There's a bigger groove, and the teeth are more separated because you're trying to get a good long cut through a tree. This doesn't do well with bone and muscle and skin and tissue, things like that. It's gonna rip it apart. You know, it doesn't give a clean cut. It gives a rough cut, and yeah, it's very painful. Of all the surgeries that were amputation, 26.3% of those people died during surgery. Now, how did they die? Several things. One, they bled out. You know, they just couldn't stop the bleeding, and they lost too much blood. Two, shock. Shock happens if some people are like, oh, I could take it, this and that. And once you see your arm, leg, whatever missing, or while they're cutting it off, you might go into shock and you could die from that. The other thing that could have happened too, infection. That was a big one, you know. So, yeah. The Union in total had 90 doctors, like qualified doctors. The Confederates only had about 24. Now, why did the North have more doctors than the South? Because again, you have to remember, like I told you like a month ago, the South saw that farming was everything. Farming is where money comes in and things like that. You know, no, why should we build this building here? It's going to take up farmland. No. when my son becomes older, I'm going to give him part of my plantation. He's going to take that land and make his own and la 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 la. So to them, farming was everything. To be a teacher, to be a doctor, to be a lawyer was seen as like, well, you're going to have to go to school for that, and it's going to cost money, and you know, yeah, no, those jobs don't. But being a farmer, yeah, that's a real man's job. You're part of the earth. Oh, when they didn't really do much, it was the slaves who did all the work. But still. And here's the other kicker with these amputations. See this booklet right here? See how they show you like a step by step, a step what to do? These doctors who would cut people would have these books right next to them. So imagine you're about to get your leg chopped off, and the doctor has a book right next to him. Like, okay, okay, right about here, I'm gonna cut that. Okay, let me look at the book real quick. Okay, so when I cut it, I'm gonna fold that in. Okay, um, yeah, I got it. I'm good. All right, let me get the saw. All right, here we go. Hold on, let me look at my book real quick. If your doctor ever did something like that, you would probably be like, you know what, can I get another doctor? I don't feel comfortable with this person doing that, cutting off my leg. But again, they didn't have that option, you know. So seeing your doctor with a book on what to do, that doesn't really build up confidence. Now, this is a little short story about one of the most famous amputated legs in American history. So, General Daniel Sickle, right? He's a general at Gettysburg. He's there, and all of a sudden, this cannonball like skips on the ground and it takes out his leg and basically flips him upside down, right? And what happens is his leg is shattered. This cannonball, I mean, hit his leg head on and it basically ripped it to shreds. So his men take him to the medical tent. And what they would do in its medical tents, when they chopped off a leg, a hand, an arm, foot, whatever, they would basically put them in this like wheelbarrow, and then they would have a hole already dug, and they would bury the foot and the legs and arms and hands and all that stuff in this hole. General Sickle basically says, "Don't chop off my leg and put it with that pile. Promise me you'll donate my leg to the Army Medical College in DC." And the doctors are like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So they amputate his leg, and they're like, well, do we donate it? Like, yeah, we said we were, so let's do it. So they donated it to the Army, and the medical college took it. They put it in a display, the foot and everything, for people to see. How does the leg look like when it's been shattered by a cannonball? How does an amputated leg look like? So it was studied and things like that. But here's the kicker. In DC, I don't know if you've ever been there or heard about this place, but during the summer, it gets very hot and humid. And remember, this is the amputated leg, which still has the blood vessels, the muscles, skin, things like that on it. So the leg starts to turn like grayish green because again it's decaying. There's no fresh blood pumping through it, and as time goes on, pieces of the muscle and skin start to peel off and drop down inside this case, this glass case. So this janitor person would have to come and clean it up, and the smell would be horrendous. So it got to the point where they just basically said, you know what, let's just clean it up, take all the muscle, blood, and all that stuff, and let's clean the bone and still display it. And this is how it looks like to this very day. You could actually go to the Army Medical College and see General Sickles' leg. Now, here's another myth that um, I hear all the time from students. Oh, well, I heard that they just give these guys some whiskey and to kill the pain, things like that. Okay, here's the problem. Painkillers were barely starting off. I think like Tylenol was like barely starting, you know, the compound used to make Tylenol was barely being invented. Um, and here's the thing, because I know you guys don't drink, but the thing is, in order to for you to drink and not feel anything, to be numb from the drinking, it takes time. And a lot of these soldiers, they didn't have time to sit around, drink, and things like that. No, they're bleeding out. They need to get amputated, be seen by a doctor right there and then. Okay, so that whole thought of, oh, they just drink whiskey to numb the pain, no, no, that's not how it works. And the other thing too is alcohol thins the blood. So if someone gets shot and they're bleeding out and they're drinking whiskey or beer or whatever, some type of alcohol, it actually makes their blood thinner and they're going to bleed out more. So it's not the smartest thing to do. Okay. The other thing is morphine. Morphine was barely introduced, it was barely created, and they couldn't make enough for everyone. You know, they could barely make enough, you know, for the top people, top generals, and some of that. But again, not even enough for them. Okay. Another big one too, I've heard. I forgot to mention this. Now I just remembered. A student asked me in class, "Well, I heard that they put whiskey on the wounds, like to clean it." No, they didn't. And here's how and why. Because the thing is, first off, whiskey was a prized commodity. People like their whiskey, like to drink it. The other thing is, the reason why you put alcohol on a wound is to clean it, to sterilize and get rid of the germs. Germs were not thought of yet. The idea of germs being out and about wouldn't come up for the idea wouldn't be brought up for another like 10, 20 years. So for someone to say, oh, just put whiskey and it'll clean the wound, no, because those guys back then had no idea about germs. I know it's kind of hard for you to imagine that, you know, but there were a time that people had no idea what a germ was. They couldn't wrap their minds around something like that. Okay. So, with no painkillers and somebody needing to get their arm, leg, whatever cut off, or else they're going to die, the only way to do that to help them through the pain was two things. One, give them some type of piece of wood or leather to bite on, and the other thing was to hold them down. Basically, there were soldiers holding down the chest of somebody, another one maybe holding down their waist area, and maybe somebody holding down their arm or leg, you know, and like putting their whole body weight onto it. Because the thing is, you have to remember, those saws I told you with those teeth like this, separated big, they're gonna feel the whole cutting of their arm, leg, whatever it is being cut. They're gonna feel every single grind of that saw cutting through the muscle and the bone. They're gonna feel it. And if they move too much, the doctor might accidentally cut or nick an artery, and then that person's dead because they're going to bleed out. So it's imperative that these soldiers hold this person down and don't let them wiggle too much, or else they're going to die. You know, so yeah, and just imagine you if you ever been cut by a knife, you know that it's like ow, that hurts. Imagine a saw cutting through the bone and the muscle of your arm or leg, and you're feeling every bit of that. If you've ever stubbed your toe and you get really mad and you feel hurt, imagine losing your arm and you feel every from the saw. Yeah. Now here's the other thing. One of the ways a lot of soldiers died was infections. The number one infection was gangrene. Gangrene is when living tissue, whether it's skin, muscle, or even the bone, like the bone marrow, some of that, it begins to die and fester and decay. Okay. So imagine like someone get their arm cut right here at the elbow, right? Right at the elbow. They tuck it in, they sew it up, but they don't sew it that good. So air and water can get in there. Or even remember, because out in the field, like a lot of dirt, you know, someone could have accidentally dropped the saw in some cow poop on the ground and they picked it up and they still cut through. So that could cause an infection. And once that, wound gets gangrene, that fungus it wants to eat and grow. So it keeps eating and eating. So it's going to go up the arm and up the arm. So they would have to cut up here to stop it from growing anymore. And the other thing too is gangrene, because again, it is a um, festering bacteria thing that it likes to eat living things. If it gets in your blood system, it's going to go to your heart. And if you don't know the anatomy, your heart pumps blood everywhere throughout your body. And if it pumps out this gangrene through your veins, through your blood and stuff like that, um, it's going to eat your organs. And you're basically a walking dead person. So yeah, it wasn't the prettiest thing. And I forgot one more thing. You can tell if someone has gangrene. So let's say you go visit your grandma, grandpa, or whoever at like a nursing home or whatever, and if it smells like old cheese, chances are they might have gangrene, which gangrene they can get from like bed sores. They're sitting in the same spot for like a really long time. So that spot on the skin that's laying on the bed or whatever it is, since they haven't moved, that muscle, blood, and stuff like that is putting too much pressure. And what can happen is um, it can fester and die. And then that's where the gangrene comes in. All right, so here's your next question. You are a doctor in the Civil War, right? You're in the battle, and all of a sudden, hundreds of soldiers are coming towards you, and four of them reach you at the same time. One guy has a shot in the stomach. Okay, now remember, well, I should say remember, but I mentioned in class, these bullets are not like the bullets we have now, where they're like at a point so they can go in and out. These bullets were like balls, and when they hit you in the stomach or any soft tissue, they basically hit and they kind of rattled around a little bit. So they tore up some of the muscle and organs in that area. The next one, leg get hit by a cannonball. Okay. The third person, multiple gunshots to one arm. So like 5 gunshots all in one arm. And the last person has a deep sword slash across the face. So basically, like their skin is like opened up like that, right across their face from a sword that's went cut through. Okay, so who do you help first? Who do you help second? Who do you help third and fourth? That's what you're going to do. You're basically telling me whose life, in your opinion, it's like on the verge of death and you need to help them first. Then like this next person, they can last a little bit longer. This third person, their wounds are not too bad. They're bad, but not too bad. And this last person, like, yeah, of all these guys, you're the least important. So you're going to put them in order first on what you think is the worst, you know, injury that you could help them, like the most life threatening injury to the second most, third most, and the last one. And then tell me, why did you pick that number one? So if you said, oh, the multiple gunshot in one arm, why did you put them first above like a shot in the stomach or a sword slash across the face? Why'd you put that person number one? Okay. I don't need all of them. I just really want the first one. Why did you put that person? Why did you decide to help that person first? Okay. So, with that being said, Once you finish this lesson, you are done. Or once you're done with this question, you're done with this lesson. It's late, guys. Forgive me. Then you're done. Okay. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. And I hope that some of these myths and stuff that you guys heard, you guys can let them go and understand why um, they are myths, why they are, falsehoods, why they don't make sense. Okay. So take care. You be safe. I'll see you guys later. Okay.